Today we're going to talk about the subject of conversations that matter in this series of conversations that matter. And I've been excited about the experience of conversation my whole life, the mystery of conversation and how it can bring us alive, how it can comfort us, how it can challenge us, how it's an immediate experience of belonging, how it can make connections in strange ways that we never could predict. I'm fascinated with the idea that there is an us, many us's, larger and larger and larger, and that we become a new self embedded in each new us. And conversation is a wonderful experience of that when we enter into a conversation, we become new. We're surprising to ourselves. We can say things that we never knew we thought before, and the conversation will bring it out in us. Conversation is a living organism. The philosopher Gadamer, who is known for his work about conversation, says that we don't conduct a conversation, we fall into conversation, and that conversation has its own life. And the highest principle is that we hold ourselves open to the conversation, that we are in service of this larger organism that we're part of, which is this living conversation. And Gadamer puts his hope for the world in dialogue and genuine conversation. And I'm with him. That's my hope for the world, that we can have more and more inclusive conversations that matter. So I have with me here Cynthia Callsen, and she is one of the few other people who is excited about conversation and exploring the nature of conversation as I am. And we've been really looking forward to doing this dialogue together about conversation. Cynthia is the originator of the group Metro Focusing, which has evolved into a community of living conversation. So anything you want to start with, Cynthia?
Well, everything you've just said about Gadamer and your belief about conversation and whatever is just, it just touches every living fiber inside of me about conversation, which I am just thrilled about. I love to talk about conversation and be in conversation, so thank you. So New York Metro Focusing emerged out of a project in my certification for becoming a focusing trainer. And originally it was, a kind of like a regular workshop setting situation where people would come and present their topics, and we'd have some experiential exercises and then, some reflection perhaps on that experience and sharing it with one another. And that would be our evening. We would have, try to bring in, diverse topics and things that we don't usually include in our.
I remember it was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was quite wonderful.
And then there was this pivotal moment when Joan Lavender had an evening where we talked about aging. And it was all of a sudden not a topic that she alone was certainly not expert on, and none of us are expert on it. We're all going through it. And it was an evening where we had a conversation about what our experiences were in this process of aging, whatever age we start at. And it was like, there was something very alive and connected within ourselves and within the group that evening. And that was kind of a pivotal moment in moving a focus of how we are together to having exploratory conversations. That I think that evening was exploring new territory, and it had a kind of double entendre of new territory of aging, but it was also this new territory of conversation in a group.
Yes.
So my particular interest about conversation specifically is about conversation in a group. And how do you do that? And it's not necessarily so easy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's difficult one-to-one to have a conversation, but this idea of the life of a group, and that the group conversation emerges, and it's something that you can't control. It's something that you can guide.
And that's, there are the two pieces of it. One is, what is conversation? How does one participate in conversation, and trying to understand that. And then there's the other piece of, how do you facilitate a conversation in a group?
Yes. So what I'm understanding is that when Joan Lavender did this presentation about aging, and it was a conversation rather than a presentation.
Right, we now call it facilitating.
Facilitating,
no longer do presentations.
You went. So that was the moment that you went from a love of presentations to facilitating, and
facilitating conversations or explorations.
Yes. And that the whole community, or at least the organizers, became very excited about this new thing of something emerging out of the group. Which reminds me of how genuine conversation fits with focusing. Focusing is the study of how implicit knowing, body knowing, emerges into thoughts and communication. And genuine conversation is that not only in the individual, but in the dyad or in the group.
Right, and how it brings to life connection.
Yes.
And my whole thing about metro-focusing from the beginning was, how do we develop a sense of community once we're not in training and have our little nice groups with our trainers, our teachers, where are we? Do we have a center? Do we have a community that we can relate to? And how does that community really feel it's connected with one another?
Right.
I think conversation is it, I really think that's central.
Yes. Conversation connects us not only to each other, but connects us to ourselves. And that's something that's so mysterious and amazing, that the connection to the other connects us to ourselves, and our connection to ourselves connects us to each other. I remember this moment with Gene Genlin when I was telling him how excited I was about Gadamer and conversation, and Gene said, well, conversation, but the only real conversation, the only good conversation, is when there's room to pause, to ask each other, what do you mean by that? Or can you say more about that?
Yes. I say, oh, please, yes. Because that's what is so particularly hard in a group.
And that's so particular about what focusing contributes to group conversation. And it's amazing to me when I'm involved in conversations with people who know focusing, the difference of tone that can happen when there's a culture that really validates and supports a silence and asking into a moment of reflection. it really takes on a different kind of tone. But then there's also the moments where people are just excited and they want to.
Well, that's what happens mostly.
Yes,
that's what happens mostly.
That's alive too.
That's alive too, but then it's like whoever pops in there first, and and some voices don't get heard. So that's where a facilitator is so important.
Absolutely.
To slow the process down. And what we came to was, rather than ask, just one little piece of facilitating and the group conversation has to do with the facilitators slowing the process down, but the focus being on listening.
Oh yes, listening is such an important part.
Deep listening and really genuinely being present in the listening.
Yeah.
So that when you speak, you're speaking from that place where what you've taken in has really become part of you. And it becomes part of what you're saying, fresh or genuinely or authentically in this moment. It's not something you've just been holding on to and waiting to say, becomes really, that's the aliveness of it. But it's both the individuals taking responsibility for themselves in that process and really in the listening, and in the facilitators creating a culture and a slowness in the process that gives space. Because sometimes we also need some silence. And it doesn't happen. It's very, very, very difficult to achieve that.
And you are very, very good at that kind of listening. I
don't know.
Admire that about you. You're very good at holding the space for that kind of listening. But that reminds me of that quote that we used, I think, for the Metro Focusing event, that most people listen to reply, not to understand. And that idea of listening to understand rather than listening with the intent to reply is so important in a live conversation.
That brings me to really wanting to read something.
Oh, good. We want to hear it.
That thrilled me and continues to thrill me.
Great.
It was, I would just want to acknowledge that it is from a chapter in a book that's edited by Laura Barnett and Greg Madison called Existential Therapy. And this chapter was written through emails, actually. Mick Cooper and Ernesto Spinelli. And their title for the chapter was A Dialogue on Dialogue. So this is this one little tiny piece, but there are 3 words that jumped out at me in it, and I will point to them. But so Mick Cooper says at one point in the chapter, what does it mean to say that we have truly touched in dialogue? I think for me, it means that something you said truly impacts on me and changes me. It doesn't just act as an opening for me to say what I was already planning to say. It doesn't simply alter my trajectory. It becomes part of my being. So for me, dialogue requires me to take toward you some kind of the 3 words, genuinely unfinished openness, where you may be able to step in and provide some answers, thoughts, concerns, worries, where the answer lies, not within me, but within you. What do you do to me that makes this a dialogue? And what do I do to you? What are we to each other if we are in genuine dialogue? Ernesto replies, in dialogue, neither one of the participants emerges from the encounter without some sense of change, personal and interpersonal, and perhaps also some sense of possibility, who I and you and we can be.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I just, it just feels almost spiritual, in
Yes.
terms of it.
Right. I do think in the broad sense it is spiritual.
Yeah.
The possibility of change,
Yeah.
I, you, and we.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I would love, to come really to life and really be born in mental focus. That's an idealized
And in the
vision.
world, yes.
In the world, yes.
Yes.
Yes.